have a crisis on my hands. So many creatures have died. This is Pandora, my 1,000-gallon cloud rainforest vivarium, which is connected through the ceiling to Arcadia, a giant treetop vivarium, and across via a cave tunnel bridge to Hydromeda, a giant wetlands vivarium. For almost 2 years, I've been culturing these 3 biome worlds, documenting the journey of their biodiverse ecosystem of plants, fungi, and animals in a novel way that has proven to be valuable to science. But a few months back, I began to notice a decrease in our forest's biodiversity with the disappearance of creatures. A few at first, but over time, more and more. I didn't worry too much because a seasonal decrease in bioactivity was normal, and last year a similar disappearance of animals happened in the vivarium around the same time. But life eventually bounced back out of hiding when seasonal conditions were more favorable. But this year, a bounce back of life didn't quite happen like I expected it would. And then last week, a total disappearance of a key species happened that was vital to the survival of our forest. And it was then that I realized our food chain was breaking down, and that for the first time ever, I was witnessing our forest's first mass extinction event. It was time to intervene and make a big change. A change that would completely break my heart, but needed to be done to save our forest. Please subscribe to my channel and hit the bell icon. Welcome to the AC fam. Enjoy. AC family, there's an imbalance in our rainforest, and it took some time for the effects to show. So many creatures have officially died out in our forest, and I had to act quickly. I would begin by doing a well-needed official tally of what species were still alive in our rainforest's 3 vivaria, and determine where in the food chain the imbalance was, what could have caused it, and take the steps needed to fix the problem. For those of you who follow this series closely, I fear you may be heartbroken at what creatures have mysteriously disappeared in such a short amount of time. Whatever the case, I was determined to restore the natural order of our rainforest. Little did I know, it would involve the release of a certain beloved species back into the wild. But let's begin our taking of species inventory in Pandora, which I felt had lost the greatest amount of biodiversity this year. Lounging on the driftwood, I spotted Snap, our resident sunskink. Every time I spot her, I marvel at how much she's grown from just the tiny and highly injured sunskink baby. Back when Godzilla used to live here, before Godzilla was evicted. With no predators to worry about in this forest, she has been living pretty danger-free as apex predator of Pandora. Now, as much as I loved her, there was something very concerning about her that I was starting to notice more and more the larger she grew. I watched her slinking around in the vegetation, and before I even realized what she was doing, she lunged into the leaves. Whoa! What's going on? She caught something. Oh, a huntsman! It was holding on for dear life. And bang! It was captured, and I watched as Snap consume the large spider in the shadows. The current generation of huntsmen in our rainforest were now juveniles, and I spotted them all around our rainforest, still doing quite well, but many of them missing legs, probably due to escapes from predation. And some huntsmen were seeking refuge in places that were predator-free, like Hydromeda. But Snap has been a very active hunter, and at this size eats a lot. It seems no prey can hide from her, as her eyesight is good, and her sense of smell superior. You guys might be excited to know that I actually found her a young suitor that I was going to add into Pandora, but changed my mind for reasons which you'll find out soon. Anyway, she basked innocently up in the driftwood to digest, not knowing that she was super close to the entrance of some other large apex predators that had moved in to occupy her lands. For behind the rock wall, I made the most interesting discovery. Towards the bottom, in a bed of dried moss, a moving ball of gray and white fur caught my eye. Micro squirrels. There were 2 of them, and they were busy grooming themselves. It was super cute to see them up close like this in such an intimate social moment. You see, these micro squirrels always darted away as soon as I approached the tank, but it seemed like these 2 either didn't see me through the glass or just didn't care that I was there, which to me meant they must be young and haven't learned to be afraid of me from other colony members. These 2 were born in our forest, from 2 of the 3 pioneering micro squirrels we added months ago to Arcadia. Interesting to see that these 2 had made their way down to Rainforest ground level and had chosen this spot as a worthy place to nest. It was clear how bonded these 2 were, as I watched one on the right grooming the other. Soon they were fast asleep in the moss. Based on the look of their genitalia, it seemed these 2 may be brothers. What do you guys think? I found it interesting that they didn't sleep with the other micro squirrels, which were up in Arcadia, which could mean they were exiled and were in search of another micro squirrel group to join, much like how lions do. Sleep well, my little micro squirrels. Now, as cute as these youngsters looked, I knew we had a problem. They were beginning to populate really fast, which space-wise is okay right now, but food-wise was an issue. You see, they eat roaches, specifically juvenile dubia roaches, being their favorite. And sure enough, I haven't been able to see dubia roaches for a long time now. I suspect the micro squirrels were responsible for this. As an attempt to call back the population, I resolved to use a trap and feed these micro squirrels to my senior green tree python. But I've come to discover that the micro squirrels are too smart and won't go into the traps. I don't know how to catch them, as they're super fast. Perhaps you guys have a solution to propose? Let me know your ideas if you have any. Whatever the case, I hope the micro squirrels continue to nest in this spot, because if any of them start having babies here, man, that would be a super cool and close-up observation opportunity. Now, I suspect these micro squirrels have a nest so low to the ground because it's close to another one of their favorite food sources. Sunny, a resident male quail, walked pompously down an aisle of grass. Grass, you ask? Yeah, it's new. You see, as a regular ecosystem event, I've had to scatter seeds and grains into Pandora as an extra food source for our quails, which I was certain our micro squirrels also loved. But interestingly enough, the seeds, which weren't eaten, had sprouted into new healthy grass. This was actually quite awesome, because this newly sprouted grass was highly nutritious, and in fact, certain nutrients become more bioavailable once sprouted that aren't so bioavailable when ingested as seed form. Cher loved her sprouts, and I even regularly harvest some for our recently evicted tortoise, who loves them. Despite the thriving of new grass, some plants appear to not be doing so well. This large plant was yellowing. It was slightly worrying because with it being the rainy season, this should be a time that our rainforest's plants thrive. But when I located the source of the yellowing, it all began to make sense. Below the soil, at the plant's roots, I spotted this creature. It was one of the beetle grubs that, to my delight, had officially entered its pupal stage. Awesome! We're about to get some scarab beetles. As to which species, I wasn't quite sure, but I was excited to find out. The beetle grub had been feeding from the roots of this plant, causing it to die out slightly. But now that it had entered pupation, was no longer a threat to the plant, who could now regenerate and grow new leaves. But speaking of beetles, before we continue on with our species inventory, I have a surprise. In this container is a creature that I am sure will make a lot of you happy. I know I was when I found it outside while gardening. Let's take it out. And behold, a giant beetle grub. But not just any giant beetle grub, I'm pretty certain it's a giant rhino beetle. It has been almost 2 years since our rainforest has seen rhino beetles. Do any of you OG AC family remember Rocksteady? Well, I've been saving this massive grub for when the Wheel of Gaia allowed me to add it into our rainforest, which last week it did. Pretty sure based on its size that this is a huge male. Let's add it in, shall we? I began to locate a place to dig a nice hole for it where it could safely be introduced to the soils. I chose this spot. Once the hole was dug out, I added some coconut wood shavings and dropped the grub into its new bed. I covered it up so no predators could get to it. Immediately, the beetle grub began to dig away from the glass. Which kicked out a disgruntled earwig from its place in the soil. In Pandora, it would feed on decaying wood in the soil and would soon pupate. I couldn't wait for it to develop into a fully formed rhino beetle, so we could welcome back an old and beloved species that disappeared from our rainforest long ago. Speaking of a species that has disappeared from our rainforest, this one will shock you. You guys know how long crickets have flourished in the forest, right? Well, you may be shocked to know that for the very first time in the history of our forest, the crickets have officially gone extinct. Yep, I know, it's crazy. No baby crickets, no juveniles, no adults. I suspect that any crickets coming down to Pandora were either eaten by the quails, snap, or the frogs. See her? Shortcake cosplayed a dead leaf as Sunny came around foraging the area. Shortcake is our resident strawberry horn frog, whom we moved in here a couple weeks back from her former home in Hydromeda. I knew she was loving it here, as there was much more potential for prey to wander close. Other frog species in Pandora were these guys, golden tree frogs. Though most of the males spend time in Hydromeda hoping to mate with females, this large female had wrapped up her breeding season several weeks back and was enjoying her spawning off-season here in Pandora. The tree frogs freely move between all 3 vivaria, the most over any other species in our forest. So the fact that she's chosen Pandora as her preferred residence probably indicates that feeding is best here over anywhere else in the forest. We actually watched her gobble up one of our newly introduced American cockroaches last week. She hasn't left since. Also up in the driftwood, I spotted a third frog species. JZ, one of our 2 chubby frogs, climbing the plants. These chubby frogs are usually only awake at night, but for some reason, he was awake during the day and was clearly on a mission. I was certain he was trying to climb up to Pandora, where his long-lost love, Beyonce, was living. These frogs are semi-arboreal, and he was either trying to reunite with Beyonce whom he hadn't seen since before their hibernation. It was actually strange, because he and Beyoncé were on the verge of missing a second year of breeding. They failed to breed last year and haven't bred this year, and only had a month or so left before the heavy rains end along with their breeding season window. For some reason, Beyoncé didn't seem to want to come down to ground level to mate with Jay-Z whenever he sung to her every night. And neither of them have decided to migrate to Hydromeda to spawn, which is what I expected them to do. Something in the environment was off that was keeping Beyoncé from wanting to breed. I even tried to dig them a temporary pond at one point in hopes that they would breed in Pandora, but to no avail. But guys, I had a suspicion that the environmental condition that was causing the failure of our chubby frogs to breed had to do with why Jay-Z was trying to ascend into the trees, and was also the cause of our ecosystem's collapse. And that environmental condition was this. Some action was happening at one of the flowering plants. Little tiny ants were crawling around the plant's blossom on its fuzzy stems. They were the nomads, our super colony of gnome ants. They had found something interesting on this plant, and upon closer inspection, I noticed they were tending to tiny plant insects. See them? They were milking sweet honeydew from these plant insects, a byproduct that is a valuable carb source for ants. I was also quite happy to find the chromatoblasters, acrobat ants, frequenting another plant nearby, also likely milking honeydew from plant insects, as well as red ants, whom I also spotted in Pandora. With the plants all bouncing back to life now from the rains, so too have the plant insects, like mealybugs, which were always an important food source for the ants. But here's where I believe things have begun to go wrong in our rainforest, leading to its collapse. If you recall back last year, we did a mass renovation as an ecosystem event and simulated a large herbivorous animal coming in to feed on the various plants in the rainforest. I tore out vines and long-standing plants and replaced them with new ones. It was a favorable and necessary ecological event as it gave rise to new plant growth. But the problem was, with old plants taken out, so too were the populations of plant insects, which I believe ultimately led to the extinction of one of the greatest group of creatures in our forest, the ants. With less mealybugs to farm honeydew from, I believe that many of the once prominent ant species that used to live in our forest died out. I also believe they were outcompeted by the nomads, the chromatoblasters, and the red ants, as well as preyed upon by the chubby frogs. A total of 9 different ant species have all vanished from our forest over time, joining our mass extinction list. This tragic loss of ant biodiversity in a forest that was once thriving with them was quite sad to see. I really needed to come up with a solution to fix things. I had an idea in mind, but to understand it, you guys have to see the state of creatures in Arcadia right now. But just a warning, it's not good news. Up in the trees, I spotted a moving ball of fur. It was one of the micro squirrels, eating some of the supplement food I offer at night. And there's another. I was guessing these were the 2 brothers from Pandora below, seeing as the 2 micro squirrels behind the rock wall were now gone. They enjoyed the mix of fruit and pellets that I add in every night. I knew a growing colony of micro squirrels were living up here, somewhere here in the trees. And judging from their bathroom area, the colony was getting bigger and bigger. Check it out. Interesting to note that the micro squirrels have a designated bathroom area and don't just poop everywhere, a behavior often associated with animals that form colonies, ants included. It's crazy how much micro squirrel poop has collected here over time. Now, the treetops used to be full of critters like roaches, crickets, colorful beetles, and giant grasshoppers, but now none could be found up here, except for Turkestan roaches, which have retreated into the soil areas of Arcadia, where I've noticed they now live and breed. In the soils, they were safe from Beyonce, who I am sure was gobbling them up. And so, AC family, this staggering decrease in canopy biodiversity confirmed in my mind what has happened to our rainforest ecosystem, the source of the food chain collapsing. And it's this. So to recap, we've lost a ton of life, including various arboreal insects, dubia roaches due to predation from the micro squirrels, crickets because various predators ate them, and many ant species due to lack of mealybugs for honeydew, out-competition from the other ants, and probably overpredation from the chubby frogs. Other creatures that have gone extinct that I haven't covered yet include our young praying mantis, which has mysteriously disappeared, again probably due to predation. Some creatures have managed to survive, like crabs, who I often spot crawling around the ground, and little tiny soil creatures like mites and springtails. Worms and snails also okay, and I did spot a few foraging termites. I also knew there were some house geckos hiding around, but it seems the majority of extinctions were of species that fell within the second and third trophic levels of the food chain, meaning creatures that feed on plants, as well as the ants. We also seem to have a pretty insane amount of species falling within the third and fourth trophic levels, meaning the predators. Guys, it has come to the point where we have way too many predators now in our rainforest. They have eliminated the majority of prey creatures. Now, having an abundance of predators is okay, assuming we have an even larger abundance of prey creatures and a robust ecosystem to sustain them. But I believe our ecosystem began to fall apart when more and more predators began to move in, mixed with a drastic landscaping event, which had ecological repercussions down the food chain. But guys, this all brings me now to perhaps one of the saddest, most disappointing deaths of all. Hydromeda's waters were still in excellent shape. Nothing much has changed here. There is still a ton of plants, fish, snails, shrimp, and some tadpoles, which have grown into tiny froglets. But a few weeks back, I added a tiny bronzeback tree snake named Shoelace into the land area of Hydromeda to prey on the froglets. But strangely, it has been weeks since I've seen it. The last time I saw Shoelace was when I first put it in here, after which I never saw it again. I figured it was just very good at camouflaging, and that I would spot him one day in the branches somewhere. Perhaps one of the other Vivaria. I did my best to scan the foliage every day in all three Vivaria, in hopes to spot it tangled somewhere in its branches. They are, after all, great at camouflaging. But one day, I caught Snap using the cave tunnel bridge, connecting Pandora with Hydromeda. That's funny, I never see her using this tunnel. She must really be hungry and is checking for roaches. And then one morning, I noticed something out of the ordinary. Snap was pausing on a vine leaf. She was breathing unusually hard. I went around to get a closer look at her, and was shocked by what I saw. Snap was totally fat, like fatter than usual. Oh no. Now there were two possibilities. She either probably managed to eat plenty of American cockroaches added in last week, or she had managed to eat Shoelace. Now remember, Shoelace was a tiny snake that could easily be mistaken for a long worm. Could Shoelace be in that big stomach, It was definitely possible, but I wasn't sure. I mean, if Snap really tried, I guess she could fit a tiny snake into that belly. Another possibility is it could have been eaten by Shortcake, one of the quails, or the micro squirrels. It hurt me to think that our snake had died so soon in our forest. And there was still hope that our beloved snake was still alive somewhere in our forest, but his disappearance was the straw that broke the camel's back, which led me to decide that we really needed to cycle out some predators. In nature, when there is a lack of prey in an area, predators will naturally emigrate to new lands where prey is more abundant. So I needed to emulate this movement of predators out of our forest. But now the big question was, which predator or predators to evict? I've been thinking about this long and hard, and eventually, I made a decision. My, have you guys gotten chubbier since I first found you guys, hopping around my home, emerging from my houseplants. I'm so sorry. I haven't been able to replicate conditions to get you both to breed in our forest. Hope you enjoyed your 1.5 years with us. I asked you guys in a community tab poll which creatures to evict, and an overwhelming majority of you said that the chubby frogs were best to go. I agreed with you guys and found the 2 chubby frogs to give them their freedom back. Go forth and breed, you silly chubbies. You still have a few weeks left. I'll really miss you. I opened the container and allowed them to leave on their own. At first, the 2 frogs stood there, taking in the crisp air around them. They hadn't remembered the world so big. Beyoncé eventually crawled away and hopped happily down the path and down my stairs, where if she continued in that direction, she would find my huge pond. As for Jay-Z, instead of following her, he strangely stood still and decided to go his own way, in another direction. I never knew why the 2 frogs never ended up mating. Was it the lack of prey insects? Maybe the timing of rain in the forest? I wasn't sure, but for sure now, they could breed, and perhaps one day Beyoncé and Jay-Z would reunite in my yard, and we can try again in the future with one of their descendants. I felt releasing the chubby frogs was the best option, because as long as there were chubby frogs in our rainforest, all ant species were simply not safe and would always be at a disadvantage, competing against the 3 dominant ant species in our forest. With them gone now, I hope it will allow prey insects to re-establish in our forest as well, which I knew Beyoncé was eating in Arcadia, formerly the cricket safe haven. I had a huge container of crickets ready to repopulate Arcadia and Pandora. And I just couldn't wait for the Wheel of Gaia to reach new ant colony, because I had some ants that I've been eager to move in. As Jay-Z crawled optimistically into the night, I realized that this release of the chubby frogs was actually an act of conservation in 2 ways. We were helping conserve our rainforest and also helping promote the next generation of chubby frogs in my area. A few days later, it rained, and all I could hear outside were chubby frog calls in my yard. It warmed my heart to think that one of those voices was Jay-Z calling out to Beyonce in an age-old ritual for the continuation of their species. I just hoped and prayed that our forest would be able to bounce back to the glorious biodiverse ecosystem it once was. But listening to a newly freed Jay-Z calling out into the rainy night, I had a good feeling it would. I spun the wheel of Gaia, and this was where it landed. Oh, the conspiracy theorists will call this staged. Vote in my community tab to affect this story.